This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X-Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the X-Zone. I am Rob McConnell, and yes, we're still broadcasting live and around the world from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, right around the world on the Starcom radio network. If you'd like to give us a call, toll free, 1-800-610-7035, email xzone at xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, X-Zone Radio TV, and you can listen to the X-Zone 724-365 by calling, or by listening, I should say, first, at 1. All right, here's the first way you can do it. www.xzoneradiotv.com. Or, if you'd like to call, there is a telephone number you can call and listen to. That is 213-401-0080. That's 213. Okay? You got that? 213-401-0080. My guest this hour, X-Zone Nation, is going to continue our conversation today on ISIS. Her name is Dr. Ann SPECKHARD, and she is the author of a new book entitled Bride of ISIS, One Young Woman's Path into Hometown Terrorism. And let me see, we're still trying to get a hold of the doctor, I see. Dr. SPECKHARD, it's Rob McConnell at the X-Zone Radio Show. How are you tonight, ma'am?
I'm good, thank you.
Thanks very much for joining us, Doctor. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a researcher. I'm a university professor at Georgetown in the psychiatry department and in security studies, and I've gone out and interviewed over 400 terrorists around the world. And I talked to their family members if they were already dead, to their close associates, to terrorists in prison, terrorists out in the field.
My gosh.
Terrorists in all different situations. And I tried to learn what put them on the terrorist trajectory.
Yeah.
So what made them into a terrorist. And what might have taken them off. I'm a psychologist, so I was interested in could we have prevented it and could we turn them around once they're already on it.
Well, let me ask you this question, Doctor. Why would anyone want to become a terrorist?
Because they're angry, because they're hurt, because they want to belong, because they fall in love with somebody that already is, because they're seduced into it. Tons of reasons. Actually, what I found when I went through my sample, in conflict zones, it's very clear. It's trauma and revenge driven. So people that are in conflict zones, they've had their house destroyed, they've had their territory taken, they've lost power, they're... it's something horrible. Their sister's been tortured, their sister's been raped, a family member's been killed, and they want to strike back. So it's very trauma and revenge driven. In non-conflict zones, like in the West, it's more seeing those kind of things over the internet and then fitting it into your own issues, whatever's going on with you. So you're off your track, you're not getting along, you feel like society's not just, and then you see these things as well, and you become convinced there can be a different world order, and I'm willing to engage in violence to try to bring it about.
You know, when I was a kid, we used to have problems too, but nobody I know ever became a terrorist. Is this because the information is so available today on the Internet that the Internet is a marketing tool for these terrorist organizations?
That's part of it. That's a big part of it with ISIS. What I say always from my research is that there's four things that make up the lethal cocktail of terrorism. Mm-hmm. There's a group, there's an ideology, there's some level of social support, and then there's an individual with his individual needs and vulnerabilities. So let's say there's a young girl that's lonely, and this is a real case. There's a young girl on the West Coast, I think she was Oregon or Washington State, and her case was just exposed in the New York Times. So she's lonely, she's living with her grandparents, she sees that there's beheadings going on, and she puts out on Twitter, why would people do this? What's this about? Well, a whole bunch of ISIS followers and ISIS members start answering her. And they seduce her slowly into terrorism. So there's a group, there's an ideology that they convince her of, slowly. She's a Christian and she's a Sunday school teacher, a kid. And they get her to convert to Islam, so they're slow about it. They're very kind and loving and trying to tell her, you know, what's right about their religion, what's not complete about hers is the way they say it, and then move her further towards violence. So the group and their ideology and social support. I mean, here's a lonely kid, and suddenly she's got all kinds of friends. They're sending her chocolates, headscarves, and books about Islam. And they're tweeting her and Skyping her and talking to her all the time. Suddenly she belongs to something.
And you also mentioned something about the leader.
Right.
What? All right, I've jotted down some notes here. Group, ideology, social support. What are the other points?
And the vulnerabilities of the individual. So let's take the Boston bombers, the Tsarnaevs. They come over from, originally from Chechnya through Dagestan, but they've been in Kyrgyzstan as well. They come over and they're immigrants dealing with all the things that immigrants deal with. A new language, a new school system. Are they going to get along in the system? In their case, smoking and drinking, and their parents disapproving. With the older one, the mother goes so far as to get him an Islamic teacher because she's trying to reform her son. So here's a kid that slowly gets exposed to a couple of ideologies. One of them is that 9/11 didn't really happen the way most people believe it happened, that it was a government conspiracy. And then later, Salafi Islam, which is just a very strict fundamentalist version of Islam. And then later, terrorist ideology. And here's a kid that is not making it in school, drops out of school. His dad gets brain cancer and goes back to the home country. His mom and dad divorce. Mom goes back to the home country as well. So suddenly he's all on his own. He was a boxing champ and doesn't get the necessary papers that he needs to make it to the top. So he's blocked in all his possibilities that he believes in for his own success and doing a lot of marijuana, but at the same time getting convinced of a conservative form of Islam that tells him he shouldn't be doing that. Somewhere along the line, it looks like it's involved in a murder. And then on the internet, finds another guy that's going to go join the Dagestani rebels. And he decides he's going to do that as well. So do you see the group, the ideology, the social support, in this case social support found over the internet? And then he goes to Dagestan and he finds all kinds of social support and a widening of who the enemy is. Before, for him, the enemy was the Russians attacking Chechnya and Dagestan. Now the enemy becomes the West. And he gets blocked from joining the rebels because he's such a bragger and so stupid. And he ends up coming back to Boston. And all these elements come together. He's studying over the internet. He gets really absorbs the teachings of Anwar al-Awlaki, who shows up in almost every Western terrorist plot. So the ideology of al-Awlaki is, according to al-Awlaki, who we droned, that Muslims must engage in jihad until the end of the world comes. So daily, forever, there's no success. You must do it endlessly. And Tsarnaev starts to believe this. And he gets his whole support for doing it over the internet and carries out a terrorist attack.
You know, when we look at the criteria belonging to a group, an ideology, social support, vulnerabilities of the individual, you could point at Christianity, you can point at Catholicism, you can point at, the Jewish tradition. People within every religious organization fit in, have the same categorizations, but they don't go out and kill people. What is it? What is
the difference is, let's say you're troubled, that you have some vulnerability, I don't know, maybe family life's not going so well, you're troubled. Mm-hmm. Chances are you're not going to engage with any terrorist ideology because it's not going to be introduced to you. You don't have those kind of friends. You're not looking for that on the internet. It just doesn't come into your life. So you have absolutely no exposure. So your vulnerabilities don't get moved in that direction. But let's make you a teenager and maybe somebody that, kind of flirting with jihadi cool. So you start looking for that stuff and you find it, and then you make a whole lot of friends on Twitter and Facebook and Tumblr and whatever else, and they're supporting you, and they're starting to influence your thinking. So now you've got huge exposure to a group and an ideology, along with your own vulnerability and social support. So the four things are coming together now. Because people used to ask me all the time, like, I started studying in conflict zones, and I would say, this is trauma and revenge driven. And they would say, well, there's so many places where there's lots of trauma and you don't see terrorism. And I said, absolutely. I lived in Belarus. My husband was ambassador there. And that's a very traumatized population, but there's no exposure to terrorist ideologies. So there's no group saying, this is the problem and the solution for it is to rise up and act violently.
Well, is the solution to cut all internet ties that have anything to do with radicalization? Should the government step in and start policing the internet more than they're doing? Should we give back the power to the National Security Agency and increase the powers of the Homeland Security as well as the CIA outside of the United States to crack this right down?
I don't know. I've thought on that, and I think that we should do our best to shut down servers that are supporting terrorist activity. I mean, it's against the laws in every Western country to engage in instigating for terrorism. So if a group is managing to host on a web server that's in the West, probably that web server has to take some responsibility and either shut it down or be shut down.
But what about the web servers that aren't in the West? How are you going to shut them down?
Well, what we're finding more and more is that they are in the West. And, for instance, ISIS is using Twitter. And that's certainly Western-based. But on the other hand, the UK has made it a crime now to download any materials of a terrorist group. And that bothers me. On a free speech issue, that bothers me, that's a crime.
Well,
I think you should be able to read anything you want. And who decides what is terrorist
Well, there has to be some accountability here. And it seems that if the youth who fall into the categories who want to be part of groups, the ideology is there, the social support is there, the vulnerabilities of them is because they're weak-minded, then somebody has to take responsibility for them because they can't take responsibility for themselves. It's not a free speech issue at this point, Doctor. It's a matter of national security.
It is a matter of national security, but, We've seen totalitarian governments argue that as well. And what I would prefer to do is prevention. I would have every 8th grader in their civics class study virulent ideologies and study groups that have promoted terrorism as the answer to a political problem, and teach the kids, do you see how there is no cause that ever justifies attacking civilians, innocent civilians? You may believe that there's a political problem that needs a political solution, but the violent solution is not the correct one. And I think that if kids got exposed in that way to terrorist ideologies at a young age, it would inoculate them from being fooled into them a couple years later. Because, 8th graders, they're old enough to understand, but they're still young enough to mold and to teach them, do you see what's wrong here? Do you see what this ideology is trying to make you jump to and why that's wrong? And can I show you all the examples where it's ended up in really horrible things? And it doesn't mean that the problem that the terrorist group is pointing to doesn't exist or shouldn't be addressed. It just shouldn't be addressed with terrorist violence. And I think that could be very powerful, and we're not doing that yet. Also, we need to have materials like what terrorists produce that are slick, that are well thought out, that have emotional aspects to them, that work to delegitimize what they're claiming. So indeed, there are kids that get burned up in drones. There are torture in places like Abu Ghraib and different places, but they use those very emotional pictures or emotion-engendering pictures to argue that therefore their brand of terrorism is correct. And we can make similar counter-arguments that we just haven't done a good job on at all. And a lot of people say, well, that's for the Muslim population to do. I don't agree at all. I think that's for the Madison Avenue smart, slick types to think through. I mean, we know how to do that. We know how to message powerfully, and it's always emotion-based. And that's what the terrorist groups are doing, and we're not.
Why not? If this is coming to a point like World War II, I'm not saying it's there yet, but who knows? ISIS is going full steam ahead. We're seeing Islamic communities taking over parts of Europe, where the local law enforcement people are afraid to go in. They want their own laws. It seems that no one has the chutzpah to stand up to Islam or ISIS. My idea is, hey, you don't like the way it is here, where the plane landed, it also takes off from. Go back home. Kill yourselves. Leave us alone.
Yeah, but I lived in Belgium for 7 years, and there's a quite large Moroccan community there. And the kids that become terrorists from the Moroccan community are second generation. Their parents came to work in coal mines as garbage collectors and on and on and on. And when they first came to Belgium, the white Belgians didn't expect for them to stay. But things changed. They allowed family reunification. They allowed them to bring their wives, settle down in Belgium. And now we have the second generation is between 18 and 30. And those kids find it very hard to get employed in a level equal to their education. So education is not free, but very affordable. And I interviewed hundreds of young men and women from Muslim descent, second-generation immigrants, that told me things like, when I go out to the bar with my 3 or 4 Moroccan friends, they call themselves Moroccans even though they're Belgians, because that's how they're referred to by the Belgians as well. When I go, and I watch this with my own eyes as well, the bouncer says, go home Moroccan. So I go home and I think, which passport do I have? I have both, actually. But this country doesn't want me. Maybe I'll find one that does. And they said, I don't get on the internet and I don't engage with the terrorist groups, but sometimes I think about it. Or Fatima tells me, I went for a job interview And the guy told me, I could never hire you with your headscarf. Or Ahmed says, you could be in charge of cleaning the toilets, even though he's got a college education.
Mm-hmm.
So these kind of things lead to anger. And
so I understand it leads to anger. So whose fault is it? Is it the government's for allowing the open immigration policies? Should the government say, hey, I'm sorry, but no way. You can visit, but you can't stay?
Well, you can't do that once you've allowed people to be born in your country. I mean, if you've got 18-year-olds that were born 18 years ago in your country and carry Belgian passports, you can't tell those 18-year-olds you're not Belgians, go home. You can stop immigration.
Sure.
But from my point of view of living in Belgium for 7 years and doing a lot of interviewing in Europe, those countries didn't think carefully enough about how the fabric of their society was going to change by allowing settlement in their countries from the countries that they imported people.
Is this what we're seeing in the United States and Canada today?
No, I think the U.S. is a totally different situation. The Muslims that came to settle in the U.S., I can't speak for Canada as well,
okay,
but in the U.S. were well-to-do, educated, bought into the American dream, and the only pocket that I always worried about, and I was right, was the Somali community that settled, big group of them settled in Minnesota and also in the Boston area, and they're a totally different situation. They came from a war-torn country, they came as refugees, they didn't fit into society, and there's a lot going on back home. And Al-Shabaab rose up, and Al-Shabaab people started recruiting from among them successfully. But in the U.S., if you look at other immigrants from other countries, they're not interested. They're just, it's not on their radar. And they're not facing the same kind of marginalization and discrimination that, we really are a melting pot, and they were most welcome, and they succeeded well. So it's not the same dynamics at all. But if I was going to blame something on Europe, I would say they don't have good anti-discrimination laws, because when I talk to people about, well, when you can't find housing or when you go to apply for a job and they tell you it's filled, but then you know that someone else just went that was white and was told, oh, yeah, come for an interview, if you sue the person, the penalties are very low and the process is very bureaucratic. In the U.S., if you face that kind of discrimination, you can win $1 million lawsuit, so nobody dares to do it.
Yeah, that raises another question. Why should an employer be forced to hire somebody he doesn't want to?
Well,
because because you've got the freedom of speech, you've got this, you've got that.
But you shouldn't be able to discriminate on the basis of religion, skin color, age, gender.
But if a guy has put his heart and soul into a business, why shouldn't the government say you have to do this, you have to do that? It's the guy's business. It's his livelihood. He should be able to hire whoever he wants.
He can hire who is ever qualified for the job, but he can't wholesale make discrimination by race or religion. And, that's a whole other argument. But
yeah, it is.
That's something that's basically civil rights, and that most people support civil rights.
Do you think
as a woman, I wouldn't like that if I went for a job interview and the guy said, well, I'm only going to hire men. I mean, would you like that if you ran into a job interview and they said, well, we're only hiring women? Or we're only hiring black people? Sorry.
You know what? I believe that a person who owns a business should be able to run that business the way he wants. That's my own belief.
There might be an argument for that for very small businesses, but there certainly isn't an argument for that for large businesses, and for it to be done wholesale, because then whole groups of people get discriminated against and have no recourse whatsoever, and they end up unemployed. And that's not good for society. But that's a civil rights argument, and I'm not a civil rights expert.
Do you think that that we are too politically correct these days? and that certain groups take advantage of the fact that we are too politically correct? Like, it ticks me off that we can't say Merry Christmas anymore. It ticks me off to no extent that people come from other countries and we have to have our rights, our traditions, and our religions snuffed because it doesn't suit them. It doesn't suit their beliefs. It doesn't suit their purposes. If we were given the same respect as they are, that's one thing, but we're not. Hey, when I was going to school, you said the Lord's Prayer. You read the Bible in school. You had Scripture at the first class. What are we going to see? They're taking off the word God from the dollar bill pretty soon? Where does it stop? If people aren't happy in the United States or Canada or the United Kingdom or Australia, no matter where they're born, if you don't like the way the system is, you have the right to change it within the confines of the democratic way. But if not, go home. Go somewhere else where your cockeyed views and cockeyed and terroristic opinions are appreciated. Am I wrong thinking that way?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
I don't agree with everything you said. I believe in separation of church and state, and I wouldn't like it if any other religion forced me to say their prayer at the beginning of my class. I think, pray at home.
But
that's a private matter.
But the United States,
pray in a public school?
The United States of America, in God we trust, not in any other deity's name, not in any other language. In God we trust.
And who defines who is God?
The same people who wrote the Declaration of Independence,
some of them had some pretty secular beliefs.
And yet
a lot of them were Freemasons. Some of them didn't ascribe to probably what you ascribe to as Christianity. I wouldn't want the government to decide for me who's God and what prayer I should say. I would prefer that's a private matter. And
when you were going to school,
our Constitution made a separation of church and state for good reason.
When you were going to school, did you do Scripture?
I didn't go to a public school.
Ah. So your school was a private school where what happened there? There was no religion, there was no theology,
We studied, I went to public school for middle school and high school, and we studied world religions.
Yeah.
But we didn't pray to anyone's God.
What are your religious views now?
Pretty open.
Would you say
pretty respectful of all religions?
So you don't have a set religious belief?
No, I do.
Okay. Do you believe in God?
Yes. But I would never try to impose my views of God on you, and particularly not using my government to do so. My husband served the U.S. government all his career at State Department. Yeah. I was the wife of a U.S. ambassador, and I would never, ever hold a government function and expect people to pray the way that I pray. I just think that there should be a separation of church and state, as our Constitution intended.
Then why on the back of the dollar bill does it say "In God we trust" if there is that separation of government and state, and church, religion and state?
Why don't we go back to talking about what I'm an expert in? I
was just asking you because, the topic came up and we're talking about religion. And isn't religion about Islam? Isn't religion about ISIS?
Every religion that has scriptures about killing has been used to justify killing innocents. So we have a Jewish guy that went into a mosque in Hebron and mowed everybody down while they were praying. And he did it following the book of Purim, the book of Esther, about Purim, and believed he was a hero. And his grave is now a place where people come and commemorate his so-called heroic deed in killing innocent people while they themselves were in the act of prayer. There's abortion clinic terrorists that have mowed down abortion doctors, believing that they had the right to do so and that they were called to do so by who they call God and by Christian scriptures. Muslims are the same.
Yeah.
They some of them use Islamic scriptures to justify terrorism. Right now, we've seen a lot more Islamic-related terrorism because that's the flavor of the day. But it's not exclusive to Islam.
Tell me about your book, Bride of ISIS, One Woman's Path into Homegrown Terrorism.
My book is based on a real case. There was a girl in Colorado, she was 17 years old, converted to Islam, took the niqab, which is where only your eyes show, and went searching on the internet for what does it mean to be a Muslim. She found Anwar al-Awlaki. She started following him. She also found a Tunisian guy that was in ISIS who began Skyping with her and proposed marriage to her. She told her father that this guy wanted to marry her and wanted to propose to him because that's the way they do it, and the father was aghast. She also started studying jihadi manuals and wanted to do a VIP attack. The FBI got wind of her because of some things she posted on Facebook and because she had scared a congregation of Christians that had a different attack earlier, and they were afraid that she was going to attack. And they called the FBI, and the FBI came and tried to warn her off, and she said she would rather die or go to prison than give up her version of Islam. And in the real case, her dad finally turned her in. She was going to go to ISIS and marry her Tunisian lover, and her dad turned her in, and she was arrested at the airport. She's now in prison. She's got a 4-year prison term. I fictionalized the case, and it goes back and forth between a fusion center with the FBI and Homeland Security guys trying to figure out, of all these people that are bragging on the internet, who are the real ones to worry about. And actually, the FBI director just today said that's exactly what they're struggling with.
Yeah, in
they're
fact,
trying to figure out who's just bragging and who's for real.
In fact, he was on Capitol Hill yesterday at a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing.
Yeah,
And
I guess
that
was yesterday.
Yeah,
that's right.
And he was talking about encryption and how hard it is for them. Yeah.
Right. So I took the real case and fictionalized it and made it a bit more exciting and picked a couple of cases of real terrorists, including Shannon Conley, and wrote a book. And it reads like a thriller. It's interesting. And it's probably the only novel you'll ever read that has endnotes, because I put endnotes for every single thing that matched a real case, so that if you're interested to know, is what I'm reading real? Does this, is this really how terrorists work and how the FBI works to fight with them? Yes, you can find that out. But you can read it, without reading an academic book. You can be entertained.
What can society do to change this entire scenario around so that young people won't want to go and fight for a terrorist organization?
There's so many things we can do. One thing is to think about the kids as all of our kids. And, to think about, okay, if we're Christians or Jews, luckily these virulent ideologies aren't circulating as much with our religious views supporting them. But think of the poor Muslim parents whose teenagers get on the internet and might run into this. Just searching for something about their own religion and run into this. Think how terrifying that must be. They need our support. Those kids need the extra word, the extra pat on the back, the extra you belong, you're important, you can be part of this American dream or Canadian dream, whatever it happens to be. I mean, one of my favorite stories is Zal Khalilzad. He came out of Afghanistan, and in his own lifetime, not his child, not his grandchild, in his own lifetime, coming out of Afghanistan, he became the U.S. ambassador to the UN. And for me, that's what great country we live in. That you can be Muslim, you can come from a war-torn, poor country, and you can become anything in your own lifetime. And that's the message that we need to be sending out to these kids. You belong to us. And, don't be thinking about going to some stupid terrorist group. Don't believe they're garbage. Believe in yourself.
Why don't these kids who are seeking answers on their religion just go to the mosque, talk to the imam? Get it from the horse's mouth without having to go through the internet and go through the indoctrination of the terrorist organizations who are just waiting for the opportunity to take someone and feed them.
They are waiting.
Yeah.
There's so many cases where girls in particular have endorsed something for ISIS, and boom, they get contacted, and they start saying, hey, are you with us? Can I Skype you? There's a girl in France, a woman in France, a journalist, who put up a fake profile as though she was 17, and she got contacted after endorsing a jihadi video. The guy himself contacted her and said, I see you liked my video. Would you like to come over and be a bride? And she decided to just play along. So she said, maybe, and suddenly he was saying, let's Skype. She said for a month he was texting her, Skyping her, calling her, and he just poured on the attention. And she said, if I really was a young, vulnerable 17-year-old, it would have really played with my mind. And within a month, he was asking her to come to Syria or Iraq. And, kids do turn to the internet nowadays. Whenever I want to know anything, I ask Google. So it's a tool that everyone uses.
I'm starting to think that China doesn't have such a bad idea when it comes to censoring the internet.
Yeah, the thing is, though, when we go back to censoring the internet, it's impossible, because this is exactly what the FBI director was saying. What's happening on Twitter now is that Twitter does shut down the accounts, but they have an automatic program that takes all their followers and migrates them to a new account that they open. So as soon as they're shut down, they open a new one. I had a friend in Israel, a very dear friend, Reuven Paz, who studied Al-Qaeda and could speak Arabic, and he would put their papers on his website. And whenever their websites would get shut down, they would say, oh, go to Prism, to Reuven Paz's website. It's all there. Yeah. And, then he would catch their internet addresses by doing that. But, it's not a simple answer like you can just easily censor these people. They're too clever. So for me, I would rather argue against what they're promoting and try to address the vulnerabilities in people. And on the level of social support, you're right. Imams, not only should they be waiting for the teenagers to come to them, they should be addressing their own congregations. And now there are initiatives, at least in the U.S., that are just starting, but it took years for them to get going, where they're going out and educating the imams. Do you know what's on the internet? Have you seen these films? Have you seen how they use Grand Theft Auto and Call of Duty, and they pick games that kids are playing and then change them into, if you want to be in the real Call of Duty, come on over and join us, so that the imam has his eyes opened, because, he's just a regular Joe trying to, take care of all the needs of his congregation. Think how overwhelmed he is, and to educate him and support him. And we also need hotlines. Most of the time, when someone does become radicalized and is moving towards violent extremism, they give fines to their family and friends, and not all of them are bad people.
That's true.
But, think about it. If your sister or brother or cousin was starting to get a little crazy and looking like they might do something violent, it would take you some time before you pick up the phone and call the police, because that's your family member. But if there was a hotline and you knew I could call and there's a psychologist and a mom on duty that will make contact with this person and try to talk him out of it. And, you know, there's just hundreds of creative and good things that we can do to stop these things.
Why is it you think we're not incorporating any of these great ideas?
I think for a long time, American policymakers believed that the fight was outside of the U.S., and they were right. Until the Somali Americans started going over and joining al-Shabaab, we weren't seeing too much of it. I mean, we had Adam Gadon from California go over. We had, although I think that was the same time period as the Somalis went, but we weren't seeing homegrown attacks growing up on our own soil, and we were seeing very few kids leave and join al-Qaeda. Now with ISIS, they have just branded it in a way that it reverberates to young kids. I mean, kids are the hopeful ones that believe that society can be more and better than it actually is. I mean, you know, our society does fail in many ways. It's not perfect, but they're sending out this message that there's an alternative view of how to live, and it's perfect. It's a utopia. And join us, and you'll help build it. It'll take a lot of violence and bloodshed, but it's going to be so perfect.
What is the ratio of Americans or white Caucasians compared to those members, those Americans who are of Muslim beliefs that actually go over? Is it 100% Muslim ethnicity?
No, not at all.
No?
Shannon Connolly was the girl next door, white as can be. Her parents were Catholic. And so, you know, that's one of the things that we put on the description of the book. Could you be living next door to the bride of ISIS? So, you know, these 4 kids grew up together, and, you know, 4 girls, and the youngest one wants to go off to Syria and Iraq to be the bride of ISIS. So you see a lot of converts. You see people of every skin color. But they do, if they're going to join ISIS, they do eventually convert into Islam, but it's an extremist view of Islam. So it's not Muslims that decide to do this. It's also just mixed up kids that
But what is
take on this ideology and take on what they believe is the Islamic religion. It's not. It's a very distorted, sick cult, basically.
But what is the percentage? Would it be 75% Muslim compared to 25% non-Muslim that actually go over there and want to partake as a bride of ISIS?
We should look at the FBI statistics for that. I don't know if they've broken them out, but the cases that I follow, they're at least 50-50 of the cases that come to mind for me right now, if not more, girls and young men that have converted. So they started out as either having no religion or Christians. So the one that was just revealed in the New York Times, she was a Sunday school teacher, a Christian. Shannon Connolly was raised Catholic. There are kids from Minneapolis that have gone over, some of them converts, some of them Muslims from Somalia. Trying to think, who were the cases? There was a kid from Atlanta that went, that one parent was Christian, one parent was Muslim. You know, it varies by person. But that's you could look at the FBI statistics. We don't know exactly who's gone because we're not sure. You know, if you travel over to the Netherlands and then carry on to Syria, all we have is a record that you went to the Netherlands.
So there's no record keeping from the Netherlands to Syria or any other point where ISIS is operating?
Well, Homeland Security and the FBI are trying to track people that look suspicious, but a lot of these people are so-called clean skins. You know, if you don't have any criminal record, and, you know, let's say tomorrow you travel over to Paris, you know, is the FBI going to track you and find out where did you go after Paris if you don't come back? You know, I don't think there's any interest, no.
So should there be...
we're not exactly sure. I mean, people have disappeared, but the people that are announcing it, and that's one thing really good, that's another thing that we can do to fight this, is that to recognize that people that join ISIS, this is a lot about identity. And especially for the younger ones under 30, they really cannot resist to announce themselves on their social media. I mean, they're all active on social media to begin with, and they just can't resist because they want to say, this is my new identity. So I have a friend, his name is Jeff Wires, he's Canadian, and he's a policeman that is getting his PhD, and he decided for his thesis to follow people on the internet, on Facebook and Twitter, that were endorsing any terrorist group. And then, as best he could, without making friends with them, without, you know, revealing himself that he was watching them, and he was doing this, he likes to joke, in his pajamas from home on the computer, he started rating them with an inventory called the Inventory of Vulnerable Persons. It was developed in Liverpool by John Cole. And out of 3,000 cases, he came up with 300 that came in the highly vulnerable to extremism. And he decided to turn them over to law enforcement. When law enforcement went to investigate, they found people with guns, with explosives, with plans to carry out terrorist plots. So this tells us that we could create a robot, or we could send a whole bunch of people to monitor social media, and a lot of these people can't resist to announce themselves.
Wow.
And they can be caught.
Maybe we should get the hackers working.
Attack.
Maybe we should get the hackers working for us.
Exactly. But this is also what our FBI director was telling us is so difficult because, you know, ISIS isn't stupid. They're figuring this out, and now they're moving into encrypted communications and probably warning people, don't announce yourself. You know, stop endorsing our sites. Stop saying, you know, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, because those are markers for law enforcement to keep an eye on you.
Where's your book available, Doctor?
Well, the book just came out on July 4th, and so right now the Kindle version's up, and the print book should be on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, I hope tomorrow, maybe the next day. So if you want the print book, you have to wait a couple more days. If you want the Kindle version, it's on Amazon right now, and I hope it shows up in bookstores.
And I'm sure you have a lot of information on your website, which I believe is www.SPECKHARD.com.
That's right. And I've got 2 other books on terrorism, Talking to Terrorists, which is about the 400 cases that I interviewed. So it's just story after story of real terrorists, their own words, and it's a good read. And Undercover Jihadi, which was about Mubin Sheikh, who was an extremist himself, got pulled out of it, and then went up and eventually walked in the arrest of the Toronto 18, who were plotting a terrible attack on Canadians.
Yeah. What are your final thoughts, and what message would you like to leave with the members of the X Zone Nation around the world?
Oh, I would say, you know, really the way we fight this is to really be aware of the people around us. And if you see someone in trouble, you know, reach out to them and give support to the people you can, because it's troubled people that fall into this. And, you know, if you can't support them and you can't pull them out of it, then be brave enough to call the law enforcement, because in the case of Shannon Connolly, it was her own father that saved her. And, okay, 4 years in prison, but at least she didn't end up dead in Syria.
How true. How true. Dr. Ann Speckhard, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure talking to you, ma'am. And X Zone Nation, the name of Dr. Speckhard's book is Bride of ISIS, One Young Woman's Path into Homegrown Terrorism. And her website is www.speckhards.com. AnnSpeckhard.com, and Ann is spelt with an E, so it's www.AnnSpeckhard.com. Now, I'll be back on the other side of the top of the hour as we continue here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. What we are doing for the very first time is going to be playing the audio tracks of 2 of Season 1 of the X-Zone TV show. We're going to be playing the audio track of my interview with Michael Horn talking about the Billy Meyer story. And in the second part of the hour, we'll be playing the audio track of my interview with Jose Escamilla. We're going to be talking about the Roswell rods. We're going to be talking about lunar bases and life forms on Mars. The X-Zone is a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And the X-Zone comes to you Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern from 8 p.m. Eastern. I'll get this straight yet. It's all these different network jugglings. From 8 p.m. until midnight, right here, live and around the world, on the Starcom Radio Network. Don't forget my good friend Ed Till, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. until 5 p.m., exclusively right here on Starcom. My name is Rob McConnell. This is the X-Zone. We'll be back on the other side of this break at the top of the hour. Don't go away. In the world today, most people want what is called the American dream. They want love, a family, a fancy car, and a nice home in a nice neighborhood. They also want a good job and money to travel to interesting places. Life is great because they have the American dream. But what happens to this dream if they hear they have a devastating illness like lung cancer? The doctor may tell them they need treatment immediately or they will be dead in 6 months. He tells them, you need surgery, and then you need chemotherapy to get better. When they get home, they think of many unanswered questions. They ask themselves, will I survive when so many of my friends with cancer have died? How will I deal with the pain, hair loss, nausea and vomiting, sore mouth and other side effects of chemotherapy and pain of surgery? Will I be able to keep on working? What will happen to my family? Then they look at the internet and wonder, is there a better way to deal with lung cancer and return to my American dream? Carl Helvey can tell you yes, there is a better way. Carl Helvey is a registered nurse with a doctorate in public health and a 38-year lung cancer survivor. Carl was given 6 months to live when diagnosed, and he refused chemotherapy and surgery. Carl used alternative interventions. Those not only helped him overcome lung cancer, but also to remain cancer-free and healthy for over the past 36 years since recovery. In his book, You Can Beat Cancer Using Alternative Integrative Interventions, Dr. Helvey will tell you his story of using all-natural treatments for lung cancer and continuing to work during his treatment. Free of pain and discomfort, Carl will also share how he remained cancer and disease-free since then without chronic illnesses or prescribed medications. His story is supplemented with chapters by Dr. Bernie Siegel, Dr. Francesco Contreras, and Dr. James Forsyth, alternative integrative physicians, and Dr. Kim Dalzell and Tanya Harder-Pierce, health professionals. All have successfully helped others overcome cancer. Research presented by the alternative physicians on their treatments for lung cancer demonstrate a significantly higher long-term survival rate for lung cancer clients than those obtained by conventional doctors. In addition, their clients were free of or had reduced side effects. You Can Beat Lung Cancer Using Alternative Integrative Interventions by Dr. Carl Helvey is now available at all major book outlets and at www.beatlungcancer.net. That's www.beatlungcancer.net. This information may help you return to the American dream. Manifestation is driven by imagination, intent, and passion. In our culture, all three have been distorted and disabled by modern media and exploitation. Re-engage your imagination and your passion by entering into the world of paranormal romance. Kahir O'Donnell takes her readers on an exciting journey into the endless possibilities of loving, passionate, and mutually respectful male-female relationship. Her latest book, The Long Dark Night, features special ops adventure, a daring rescue, a psychic woman from the stars, and a special agent that will die to protect her. The Long Dark Night by Kahira O'Donnell is now available at kahiraodonnell.com or amazon.com. Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses by Brad Olson, consummates the lifeology story about where humanity originates. It is the lost continents, the primitive wisdom, the mythos of creation, and the rethinking of ancient history as we are taught in academia. There is much more to the story than what we have been told. As this is the first book in the Esoteric series, Modern Esoteric starts at the beginning of time and accelerates up to this modern age. Future Esoteric is book 2 in the series and takes a forward-looking position ahead of today with an open and honest examination of the ET issue and various unexplained phenomena. To discover the writings of author Brad Olson, visit www.bradolson.com. That's www.bradolson.com. Fartlets, fartlings, pongies, and honkers. They have so many names, makes you go bonkers. Rear tempest, butt bubbles, bottom burps, all aside. Why does it smell like a little rat died? Hail the fart, whenever, wherever, whoever. Its existence actually enriches our lives because it gives us those unforgettable moments that we can all recall again and again that are always good for yet another laugh. A new expose on farting. Get your copy of The Endearing Fart by Eileen Dover at www.theendearingfart.com.